Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan Wong. I am currently a third year business finance major, and I'd like to thank you all again for attending my video presentation today. So before we begin, I'd like to highlight the importance of helping and motivating each other to succeed during these uncertain times caused by COVID-19. If you have any questions about what we're going to be discussing today, or just need the support and encouragement from another individual, please don't hesitate to reach out to me personally through my email. I'd be more than happy to do my best in helping you guys understand this material as much as possible. So for today's agenda, we are going to be discussing a branch of leadership known as organizational leadership. I'm going to be breaking this lecture up into two segments. For the first segment, I will be going over what organizational leadership is and how we're all going to eventually utilize our knowledge of this as peer educators. I will also go over the importance of an organization's mission and vision, what our duties are as a positional leader, and the different types of decision making. For the second part of our lecture, I will be going over the topic of committees and different types of committees, the importance of scheduling meetings, and to finish it off with how we can promote organizational change. And to help you all better understand this material as we go through it, I'll be having two different Kahoots at the end of both sections to better help you guys, get the information. So yeah, let's begin. So you may be wondering, what is organizational leadership? Well, by definition, organizational leadership is the ability of an individual to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute towards the effectiveness and success of the organization of which they are members. To put it simply, organizational leadership is the utilization of your leadership to ultimately benefit the organization which we're a part of. Aside from the listed duties that are required of a peer educator, such as helping students succeed with their academics or encouraging students to stay in school and work hard, or encouraging students to follow good habits and act ethically, there is so much more that peer educators can do to help make positive changes within the organization. This basically means that the decisions we make as a peer educator should ultimately benefit both the students and the organization as a whole. A couple of things worth noting about organizational leadership is that it typically takes place on a wider scale, involving 20 or more people. It often involves leading a collection of groups rather than a collection of individuals. So think about what groups the individuals which you're leading are a part of. This could pertain to race or personal agenda, such as their school year or their majors or their minors, and so forth. Additionally, organizational leadership requires knowledge of the larger system which leadership takes place. So think about the bigger picture as a leader. The more knowledge a leader has about the organization they are participating in and how the system works, the more effective a leader can become. It's also worth noting that an organizational leader should know that they aren't simply teaching a course on its own. They are working together to influence others and better an organization as a whole. So there are specific steps to gaining knowledge about how your organization works. It's important to familiarize yourself with the organizational chart of your organization, which is essentially the structure of authority within, your organization. It lays out the chain of decision-making commands, who the decision makers are, who follows and leads what. You can also keep up with current events on campus and immerse yourself within campus culture, such as through joining orgs and spending time in places where important people within your organization tend to gather. By doing so, you can better gauge the atmosphere of what's currently happening on campus and understand why your organization stands to exist. Which brings us to our next topic, organization's missions versus its vision. So an organization's mission generally refers to its current purpose and goals. Think about the reason why your organization does what it does. In our case, think about the reason why we have the peer educator program for first years and what goal this program ultimately is working towards. An organization's vision, however, refers to what the organization aspires to become in the future. So think about the bigger picture. Vision is a clear, definitive statement of what your organization is trying to accomplish and what our campus would look like once this vision is accomplished. It's worth noting that the vision and mission statements of the organization which you're participating in should clearly match your own personal goals and values. That way, you can more easily adopt the reasons why your organization does what it does and transpire it onto the individuals which you're leading. The next thing we're going to be talking about is something called a positional leader. Now, a positional leader is someone in an organization that holds a certain amount of authoritative power in the decision-making process. In our case, as peer educators, we are positional leaders because we have the authority to make decisions that affect the students that we lead. We have the authority to decide, for example, how we want to go over specific topics, or if we want to assign homework for a week. All of these processes define our roles as a positional leader. As a peer educator, we are all positional leaders for the organization which we participate in. So to string off the topic of being a positional leader, it's important to make it clear to those you lead just how the decision-making process works within your organization. It's important to show those you lead what organizational power you possess and how you'll tend to use it to your authority. There's actually a term known as implicit leadership. Implicit leadership is where an organizational leader is more likely to be listened to and respected when there is a close match to what is expected out of an organizational leader and what the leader actually does. So by following the already known stigma of what an organizational leader is, one can be listened to much more effectively. So, for example, within my own experience as president of another organization, even when I was very unfamiliar with the extent with which I should utilize my authority, I found that general members already have a sort of stigma to what they expect me to be able to do, such as my authority to make executive decisions or allocate executive power and oversee all other positions. Once I've realized this, I found it much easier to be listened to when I followed these specific boundaries. The same goes for being an organizational leader. As a peer educator, students often have a sort of stigma of what they expect you to be able to do, such as lead the course material and help them with whatever issues that they might be having. These are all perfectly okay, and if you do follow these, you are much more likely to be respected and followed. So the last thing I will be covering during this first segment of the lecture will be the decision-making process. There are two types of decision-making: authoritarian decision-making and participative decision-making. Authoritarian decision-making is when leaders make decisions on their own with little to no input from the group which they lead and or from other organizational leaders. To put it very bluntly, this is extremely similar to a dictatorship. Now, while authoritarian decision making can be very useful, it's important to know the right time and place for using it. Typically, it can be useful when there is no time to consult other important figures and the authoritarian decision being made is the most ethical and right thing to do. So, for example, let's say you're a peer educator during one of your classes and you find that you finished covering the topics that you're needed to go over and you have 10 minutes to spare before class is supposed to end. Because there's 10 minutes to spare and there's not much else for you guys to talk about, you and your partner decide to end the class early. Now, this is a good example of authoritarian decision making because there was no time or point in consulting the people with higher authority. There wasn't enough time for you to reach out to one of the higher ups and ask, can I end this class early? And that honestly would be kind of a waste of their energy by going over something as, small as this. So ultimately, you and your partner ended up making an ethical decision for the benefit of your class. Another example would be if there was a student who needed an extension for one of their homework assignments. Let's say that they give you a really good excuse and times are tough. So because of this, you offer them the homework extension. This is another example of authoritarian decision making. This is a good example because while there is time for you to consult with the higher ups, ultimately it's your decision because this is the class that you're leading. And so in the essence of saving time and energy, you give them a 2-hour homework extension, for example. So while these are good examples of authoritarian decision making, it's important to note that abusing this power can often make you lose the respect from the people you lead and from other organizational leaders, and even from the organization itself. This is because you're using authoritarian decision making to show that there is a clear disparity of power within the authoritative hierarchy, which furthermore reinforces the idea that individuals below your chain of command have little to no say in the things that you do. So it's important to know when and where to use it and as little as possible. For example, let's say that during one of your classes, you aren't encouraging active discussion, and instead you're shutting down anyone who wants to speak up or ask specific questions. This is a bad example of authoritarian decision making because you, while you're not consulting other individuals, such as your peer educator partner, you're doing things that aren't for the best of, the organization. It's not ethical to shut people down. It's not ethical to deny people from their voice or their right to ask questions. So it's best to not use this sort of decision making unless it's extremely necessary. The next type of decision making we're going to be talking about is called participative decision making. So now participative decision making is when leaders consult with other organizational members. They consider their ideas and attempt to incorporate everyone's input into their final decision. So compared to authoritative decision making, this actually garners respect because it shows that everyone's ideas and inputs are all greatly valued within the decision making process. It shows that no voice goes left unheard. This is also important because within the participative decision making process, important information about a decision is shared with all followers, promoting transparency and democracy. Ultimately, effective leaders are facilitators, not dictators. They promote the sharing of ideas rather than keeping it to themselves. They encourage the support and input from others so that they can best make a decision that benefits the group as a whole. During this course, we'll generally be talking about the participative decision-making process. So to reiterate, participative leaders empower their followers to make choices and decisions through voting or by finding a majority in consensus. To reach consensus, it's important to highlight the ideas from all individuals before tackling them and reaching a conclusion. Some methods for reaching a consensus can be finger voting, where each person raises a finger for how much they strongly agree or disagree with a decision or an opinion, or the nominal group process, where a group ranks the list of potential options, or the multi-voting technique. Finally, whatever decision is being made is going to be your final call. No matter what the group consensus is, the final decision being made is on your hands, and it's up to you to be responsible in facilitating the best decision possible. Great, so that concludes our first half of the lecture. Now, for a fun little activity, I'm going to be asking you all to switch over to your phone or laptop because we will be playing a quick Kahoot to help you all retain what you've learned so far. So please go ahead and log into kahoot.com and enter the pin 096777747. I'll also have it listed on the screen next to you. So I'll also be taking the Kahoot with you all on my phone to better help you understand the information, and we'll kind of just go over it together. Okay, so the first question is, what is the theme of our lecture? It's kind of loud. Think about what we've kind of been talking about since we began this lecture. The options are the authoritarian decision making, implicit leadership, organizational leadership, and participative decision making. Okay, so the correct answer is organizational leadership. So to kind of reiterate, organizational leadership is the ability of an individual to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute towards the effectiveness and the success of the organization of which they are members. So organizational leadership, in our definition, is by being a peer educator and doing our job as best as we can to help benefit the program. Going on to the next question. It's important to match the mission and vision of your organization with your own values or goals. True or false? So this answer is actually going to be true. Like I said before, it's really important to understand the mission and vision statement of the organization in which you're working for. So, for example, in our case, it's important to understand like why CHAS First does what it does. It's important to understand the mission and the values for which it stands for. It's more effective as a peer educator when you align these with your own set of morals and values and goals, because this ultimately helps you adopt the mission and values of the program, and you can transpire it onto the individuals which you're teaching. Cool. So going on to the next question. What can you do to better your knowledge of your organization? Answers are familiarize yourself with the organizational chart, understand the mission and vision statements, keep up with current events, or all of the above. So the correct answer is actually going to be all of the above. Ultimately, it's important for you to understand your organization as much as possible. And the ways you can do that is by keeping up with current events, by involving yourself with other orgs on campus, and etc. Cool. So we're going on to the next question. What is the preferred method in the decision-making process? Is it authoritarian decision-making or participative decision-making, implicit decision-making, or none of the above? Okay, so the correct answer is going to be participative decision-making. To reiterate, what is participative decision making? Participative decision making is when you actually consult with other people and you garner their ideas and you all share knowledge to come together to make the best decision possible. Compared to authoritarian decision making, where you basically make a decision on your own and you don't really consult other people. And oftentimes, authoritarian decision making can actually be quite useful when there isn't enough time or energy to consult with other people, and you have to do what's right. But remember that with authoritarian decision making, you should be using it as little as possible, and you should be making sure that you're doing the most ethical thing. But yeah, the most preferred method in the decision making process is participative decision making. And that is where everyone's voice is heard and everyone can come together and you can all collaborate and make sure that all options are not left unheard of. Cool. So going on to the next question. Generally, you want to involve the consensus of as many individuals as you can within the decision making process. True or false? This one might be a little easy for you all, but yeah, so the answer is true. Like we said with participative decision making, you generally want the consensus of as many different individuals as possible. This isn't just so that you can appease to everybody. It's so that if there are any potential ideas or options out there in the open that people have thought of, they don't go left unheard of. You really by utilizing the participative decision making process, you can better understand what everyone's ideas and emotions are and take that all into consideration when making your decision. Great. So the next question and the final question, what is positional leadership? Is it when a leader makes a decision based off of the consensus of the majority? Is it an individual that holds an amount of power in the decision making process? Is it when a leader makes a decision without consulting anyone else, or none of the above? So the correct answer is going to be the blue one, actually. So positional leadership is an individual that holds an amount of power in the decision-making process. So like I said, as peer educators, we are all taking a part of positional leadership. We are all individuals who hold a certain amount of authority within the decision-making process. It's just important to know when to utilize it and how you can utilize it, which is essentially what we talked about during this first half of the lecture. Cool, and that's it. That concludes our first Kahoot. So I hope you all enjoyed that and were able to understand as much of that as possible. Now we're going to be moving on. So the next thing we'll be talking about is the topic of committees. Now, committees can be extremely helpful with the delegation process. They can serve to bring together members of an organization and encourage the idea sharing process. This is extremely helpful when a leader needs assistance with the decision-making process and wants to reach consensus from their committee, or when a leader just needs help carrying out a decision and wants the authority and wants to share their authority with the committee. In my own personal experience as president of another organization, I believe that we needed to improve our philanthropy one day, and I wanted to host a charity event for us. However, because this task was not easy for myself alone, as we were going to invite a multitude of different organizations, we were going to plan out an entire event. There was supposed to be a schedule and an agenda, a lot of work essentially. And because of that, I decided to open a committee with a group of individuals who were willing to help me carry out this task. And within this committee, I was able to delegate duties to each person. For example, one person's duty was to help plan the schedule of the event, another's was to help, with contacting other organizations that we were going to collaborate with. The third person was actually responsible for communicating our decisions with the rest of the active members. So because I was able to delegate duties to each person, we were able to basically come to final decisions about the event a lot more effectively. I was able to hear a lot of different ideas from everybody. We were all very happy with the final product. This is a really good example of utilizing your committee effectively. Like I said, you want to make sure that you're including the voices of everyone there, but also making sure that you guys are following the agenda that's listed, you guys are doing what you're responsible for doing and carrying out a certain task. Utilizing a committee can be extremely helpful because it ultimately just gives you extra manpower, if that makes sense. Within an organization, there are different kinds of committees with different purposes, and while many can be combined into one, like I've already kind of said earlier, usually there are different kinds, such as coordinating committees, advisory committees, and review committees. A coordinating committee serves to help communicate information to its members and coordinate member activities. Advisory committees, on the other hand, can help with generating recommendations that are forwarded to another person that has the authority to carry it out. So, for example, think of an advisory committee as somebody who kind of just listens for information and, you know, looks at what's happening and then forwards that to a person in charge so that that person in charge can make a decision with that information. Finally, there's a committee called a review committee. Review committees serve to receive and review reports in order to help forward it to another member of a higher power. That's essentially kind of what an advisory committee does, except they analyze it and give the member of higher power, more knowledge about like what the right decision is. So as you can see, each type of committee has a specific duty and method of helping the individual that they're led by. It's important as an organizational leader to know how to properly utilize committees and get things done as quickly and efficiently as possible. Another thing that is important to utilize as an organizational leader are meetings. So scheduling and conducting meetings are an extremely important responsibility of an organizational leader. They're where you can gather individuals to share ideas, to reach consensus for any potential decisions, and acknowledge the voices and ideas of everyone, ultimately furthering the participative decision-making process. So in the process of hosting a meeting, it's important to know how to run the meeting. Before beginning any meeting, it's of utmost importance to set an agenda to serve as sort of a guideline during the meeting. By having an agenda, everyone at the meeting can go through the required material in the shortest and most efficient amount of time as possible. This is because having an agenda lets members at the meeting know exactly what is going to be discussed, which also helps promote transparency between yourself and the members at the meeting. In addition to having an agenda, it's important to assign an individual to help keep minutes of the meeting. So meetings can often be long and exhausting. So it's important to have somebody that is responsible for keeping minutes so that any individual may be able to review what was talked about at the meeting after it finishes. This is extremely similar to taking notes at a lecture. So let's say that you all are hosting a meeting and you're going over a multitude of different topics. It goes way beyond over 2 hours. Oftentimes, by the end of the meeting, people are exhausted, they're tired. So by keeping minutes, it's actually very useful because after the meeting ends, when there is extra work left to do, those individuals can refer back to the minutes and say, hey, at this time, we talked about this and this and this. So, it's ultimately just very, very useful for keeping track of the meetings that are being run. In conducting meetings, it's recommended to follow the parliamentary procedure. The parliamentary procedure is where an organizational leader calls a meeting to order, goes through the agenda and any announcements which anyone else may have, then proceeds with taking care of any unfinished business and finalizing any new business. By having a process by which meetings are run, it allows it to be more orderly and less chaotic. So with the parliamentary procedure, basically it allows you and the members at the meeting to sort of know what is going to be talked about next. There is a rough guideline of the order of the things that are to be said. So by having that, people can speak up when necessary and keep quiet when it's not needed. And it just helps the meeting run a lot faster. Now, as an organizational leader, you have to know when and where to utilize your authority. Oftentimes, you will face conflicts during a meeting and you'll be expected to resolve it as quickly and efficiently as possible. It's important to remember that during these disputes, you're the one in charge. And while this doesn't mean that you should abuse your speaking power, you should be able to use your power to hear out the conflicting ideas and try your best to help the group reach a consensus. Remembering the organization's mission and vision can be helpful during this decision-making process. So for example, let's say you're holding a meeting and two individuals have conflicting ideas. As an organizational leader, you can use your authority effectively by firstly understanding both of the ideas that are being said, helping both under helping both individuals better understand each other, more importantly, and come to a conclusion that will best promote the organization's purpose and goals. Lastly, we will be going over promoting organizational change. This is kind of the bread to the butter of this lecture. Promoting organizational change is the process of involving an organization's policies, programs, or practices to more effectively help achieve its missions and goals. One of the best ways to help with promoting organizational change is knowing what kind of change is needed in the first place. This can this can easily be done by immersing oneself with campus culture and understanding what your organization can do to better help improve it. You can also utilize surveys, conduct interviews, hold suggestion boxes, and ultimately listen to the feedback from your own students. By better understanding what's going on campus, you can better gauge what type of organizational change is needed. So you can also utilize different strategies to help catalyze organizational change. Once you've come to an understanding of what you can do to help promote organizational change, what's left to be done is carrying it out. As an organizational leader, you can hold meetings with members of higher authority to discuss your ideas. Having a strong arsenal of details to support your ideas are very helpful. Different methods that are useful when discussing your ideas are by appealing to reason, also known as logos, which you might have heard of. So, by showing that your proposed change makes logical sense, members at your meeting can better understand the logic behind your reasoning and stand on the same ground as you. Having strong evidence can further this logical reasoning. Other methods for catalyzing your ideas are by appealing to ethics, also known as ethos. By showing members at your meeting that your change will appeal to their personal conscience and support overall moral principles, there is a better chance that it will garner their support. So to conclude this segment, remember that promoting organizational change isn't something that one individual can tackle alone. It's a long and steady process that often requires the support of other organizational leaders and members. So by utilizing the skills which you've learned today, you will not only better yourself as an organizational leader, but be able to make the changes where you see fit. And yeah, that just about wraps it up. So now we're going to be having our second Kahoot of this lecture. If you can, please log back onto your devices and head to kahoot.it with this pin number 04061906. I'll also have it on the screen next to me. And I'll also be going over this Kahoot with you all to help you all better understand this information as much as possible. Also, feel free to pause the video at any point if you all need more time understanding something or you just need more time to read it, for example. So the first question is, how can you most effectively promote organizational change? You can do it by generating committees or holding meetings, all of the above or none of the above. So the correct answer is actually going to be all of the above. So in order to better promote organizational change, like I've said, you often need the input and guidance from other individuals. You want to make sure that no ideas are left unheard. And this can easily be done by generating committees to help you with promoting this organizational change, or holding meetings where you can discuss your ideas with other individuals that share the same morals and values and principles as you do. So for the next question, during a meeting, it's important to keep track of minutes, listen to everyone's ideas and opinions, resolve disputes when necessary, or all of the above. The correct answer is actually going to be all of the above. So to reiterate, during a meeting, it's really important to be keeping track of minutes because that way, when the meeting is finished and you need to refer to any material that was said earlier during the meeting, you can easily refer to the minutes. So during a meeting, it's also important to listen to everyone's ideas and opinions. To reiterate what I've said earlier about participative decision making, this is where essentially you all can get a better gauge of what everyone else in the meeting is having a feel for. You can see what their ideas are. You can see what things the people at the meeting might want to improve, anything that's good or bad. You can take advantage of all these different ideas and add it to your own to better make the best decision that you can. Lastly, during a meeting, it's important to resolve disputes when necessary. This is extremely necessary because during a meeting, there will tend to be disputes, and it's up to you to utilize your power as an authoritative figure to resolve it and ultimately better the organization as a whole. So our last question is going to be true or false. Having an agenda at a meeting can be very useful. The answer is actually going to be true. So like I said earlier, having an agenda during a meeting allows you to form a rough guideline of things that are going to be talked about. So at the start of the meeting, people can look at the agenda, think about what is going to be talked about, think about any ideas that they might have, anything they might want to say also when it does come up. So by having an agenda, it helps with keeping everything orderly, and you can also better follow the parliamentary procedure. And yeah, that concludes our Kahoot. Thank you all very much for attending this session. Please feel free to reach out to me if you've had a hard time understanding any of the material. Know that I am here for you all during these hard times, and I want to try my best to help everyone here, get the material during this class. So yeah, thank you and stay safe.